Hello everyone and welcome back to ChatCraft. Before anyone complains, I did cheat to get these items. Didn't feel like mining for diamonds, especially not in single player. It's kind of defeats the point to my mind. I did sort of have a topic prepared for today. But I'm not quite certain how interesting it'll be. Anyway, bear with me while I find some torches. So I was going to talk a little bit about probability and statistics and such. The first point is not really anything groundbreaking or incredibly new. It's just a kind of general point. Pretty much any event that does happen had an incredibly low probability of happening. And I guess the point is, the more you specify the event in question, the more unlikely it basically became or becomes. I guess I might as well take some oak wood with me. I think I have some of it left, don't I? Okay, the rest seems to be jungle wood. I actually need some acacia seeds, but didn't feel like hacking those in just yet. Okay, I have 2 stacks of oak wood, that should be fine for now. As I said, eventually I'm switching to acacia, but not right now. Yeah, the point is, the more you specify the event, the lower the chance of it originally happening basically become. And I guess to make that a little less cryptic, consider a fair coin. So by fair coin I mean it's got an equal chance of getting heads and tails. 50-50. It's kind of the most famous quote-unquote random number generator that we have. And now, as you all know, of course, in the long run we expect 50% heads, 50% tails. Assuming it's a fair coin, of course. So if I asked you, what are the chances of getting, say I throw the coin 10 times, what are the chances of getting 6 heads, 4 tails? You could tell me, not that bad. What are the chances of getting 10 heads? Quite low. So in that way, it's kind of just as you would expect, basically. But instead, you could be asking a different question. You could ask, what are the chances of getting first heads, then tails, then heads, then tails, then heads, then tails? So just alternating, basically. And if you just do the calculations, you will come to the conclusion that the chances of getting that specific order of heads and tails, the chances of that happening are exactly the same as the chances of getting 10 times heads in a row. And 10 times tails, obviously. Which to some people seems counterintuitive, because they assume that getting heads 10 times in a row should be an incredibly unlikely event that basically never happens. But the thing is, we can easily calculate the odds of getting heads 10 times in a row. It's roughly 1 in 1,000. So that means if you, for example, take 2,000 people, and you basically tell them all, okay, you give each of them a coin and they flip it, and then everyone who got heads has to leave, everyone who got tails can stay. And you do that 10 times over, and whoever's left gets some sort of prize money. Then chances are you're going to get 1 or more winners in the end. And in order to win, they had to throw heads 10 times in a row, or tails, whichever one I said. So by specifying not only that we want a certain outcome to occur with a certain frequency, so we're not just saying we want half heads, half tails, but we want a specific order of these, we're basically removing the, I guess, the point that heads and tails are of equal probability. Because if we take the order of the coin results into account, then any outcome is equally likely. So if you throw your coin and you get any result at all, basically you just write down the order in which you got your 10 results, then that particular ordering of results had a chance of 1 in 1,000 of happening, whichever outcome you have. And that's kind of the point. It doesn't matter what outcome it was incredibly unlikely to happen just like that. And the same is true for many, many things in, I guess, nature and everyday life. The chances of it happening exactly the way it did are incredibly slim. Or were incredibly slim. Now that when it did happen, of course, the chances actually become 100% because it did happen. So the chances of it having happened are roughly 100%. Guessing that's deep enough. And there was another point I was going to make, which is about the lottery. Which, the lottery in Germany, the main one, is basically 49 numbers are put into the pot and 6 numbers are randomly drawn. And just as usual, you basically bet on which numbers are going to be drawn. And so people there are some people who have a lot of really wrong theories about how that works. There are those which always play the same numbers. Now some of them do it just for whatever nostalgic reason, I guess, or because it's like the birthday of their wife and children, stuff like that. So, well, doesn't really matter why they choose certain numbers. The point is, you're not increasing the odds of winning if you choose the same numbers over and over, which a lot of people seem to believe, that if they choose the same numbers over and over, they're bound to get the correct ones eventually. And it's obviously true in a way. I mean, yes, eventually you're going to get the right numbers, probably not in a lifetime, but if you were to play forever, then yes. But you're not increasing the odds. And that's something called the gambler's fallacy. It's the assumption that somehow random events like that have memory. And how it goes is usually, again, by analogy. You would have, say, a dice. So the possible outcomes are obviously the numbers from 1 to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's what you can get. And so the gambler's fallacy is basically the idea that if you just got a 6, the chances of getting another 6 is somehow lower now. But it's not, because the dice doesn't remember what it got last time. The chance of getting a 6 after already having gotten a 6 first time is 1 in 6, just like it was before. And it's kind of the same thing with the lottery. If you get some number some lottery numbers as a result in 1 week. The chances of getting that same number, or that same sequence of numbers in the next week, doesn't change. So each outcome in the German lottery, which I explained, has a chance of roughly 1 in 14 million, I believe. And it doesn't matter when the number was drawn last. A number that was last drawn, say, 2 weeks ago, or a number that was last drawn yesterday. Well, it's not a daily lottery, so it doesn't really work that way, but you get the point. You're just as likely to get the number drawn weeks ago as you are to get the numbers drawn in the very last drawing. So, that's that's basically the gambler's fallacy in a nutshell. It assumes that the chances of a certain outcome vary depending on the outcome last time. And obviously there are certain kinds of distributions where that would be true. For example, I guess if you know that within a certain given time frame at a call center you usually get a certain number of calls, then in a way the number of calls you've already gotten influences the chances of getting another call within that time frame. So in that case, if you've already gotten your, I don't know, 15 calls per hour within the last 15 minutes, the chances of getting another call would actually be smaller. It would depend on, obviously, how you model the whole thing, basically. Let me think. I think this might be the way to go. I don't know. Luckily, I don't have to worry about mobs spawning. But yeah, actually going back to the lottery, that was a kind of point I was going to make. Not only do people tend to play the same numbers over and over, they also tend to try and get their numbers as random as possible. Actually, let me go like this. Like they're trying to get number sequences which have very little regularity to them. Because somehow the assumption is that for example, the numbers, if we're just saying 6 numbers are drawn, and they assume that the chance of getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are substantially lower than getting 1, 17, 19, 47, 69, and 87. Whatever, I just made up numbers. And again, that's not true. If, obviously, it's a fair lottery, as fair as a lottery can get, then the chances of getting the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are just the same. So, does that mean you should be playing, if you are playing the lottery, which, well, I guess, to each their own, does that mean you should be trying to go for a regular sort of number system, whatever? And no, you shouldn't. The problem is, it's not only about how high the chances of winning are for you. If that was the only point in question, then it wouldn't matter which numbers you play. You could play the same ones over and over, you could play different ones each week. It wouldn't change your chances of winning. But if you do win, at least in most lottery systems I'm aware of, and multiple people get the same correct numbers, then you end up having to share. So if I don't know, 5 people each guess the correct numbers, then if you win, it sort of gets diminished by the fact that you don't get as much as if you were the only winner, basically. I don't know how long I've been talking, by the way. Just started my timer, so this episode might be a little off in terms of length. So what you should be trying to do is get a sort of a sequence of numbers which few people are likely to use. There was a case here in Germany at some point when the lottery was drawn, and as it happened, about 100 people all had those exact numbers. And they were not sort of like a group of people which bet together, which happens in Germany as well. Basically, it's like 100 people going together, everyone guesses their numbers, and if anyone in that group wins, they share the winnings, basically. Sort of a betting community kind of thing. And it wasn't that. So in those cases, you don't get 100 winners, you just get one winner who splits his winnings 100 ways. Because, well, it's sort of the point of that community. But these were actually 100 people each having gotten the same numbers completely independently. So it was a bit of a mystery until someone looked at the numbers and where they were on the betting slips. And as it turns out, they just formed a regular pattern. So people had sort of like a square house-shaped pattern thing. A very regular pattern where the numbers were on the betting slips. So if you do indeed play the lottery, what you should be trying to do, since every outcome is equally likely, you should try and somehow find an outcome, or find a combination that is not very regular, so that few people are likely to have chosen that exact sequence of numbers. Because while the chances of winning are the same, the chance of someone else having the same numbers is lower. So, yeah, I'm guessing that's a good point. Now, let's look at my notes. I've done the gambler's fallacy, I've done the unlikely events. Okay, there's a thing which is sort of related to probability. I'm not certain, I think it has a certain fixed name, but I don't know that name. So we're just gonna call it the goat problem. And I believe this was a real game show at some point, but don't quote me on that, I might be wrong. And the idea was that after the show had run its course, the winner, candidate, whatever, he basically had to choose one of 3 doors. And behind one of the doors was the main prize. It's usually stated as being an expensive sports car, but it doesn't really matter. One of the doors contains the main prize, whatever it is. Let's just go with a car. And the other 2 doors contain not the prize. In the original formulation of this thing, it was a goat. But I guess it could really be anything that's not the price. Whatever it is. It's if you choose one of those 2 doors, you lose. And so the candidate would have to choose one of the 3 doors, and then the game master, the host of the show, whatever, he would open one of the other 2 doors, and it would always be one that has a goat behind it. So he would show the candidate a door that he had not chosen, which did not contain a which did not contain the price. And the question becomes, because the candidate was then given a choice, he could either keep the door he had already chosen, or he could keep the other door. He could switch his choice, basically. And the question was, should he? Basically, should he keep his door, the one he chose originally, or should he, somehow using the information he just got, should he change doors? And I think I'm out of wood. Pretty much. And so the sort of usual reaction, I guess, is that indeed it doesn't matter. Because he'd chosen his door, the chances of getting the correct one were 1 in 6, 1 in 3. So the chance of that door being the correct one is still 1 in 3. And that's where you would be wrong. The point being, you influence the choice of the game master with your choice. And this seems to be somewhat counterintuitive, so I'll just run through it, basically. You originally choose one door, so you had a chance of winning and a chance of losing. And the chance of the door you chose being the correct one is 1 in 3. And the chance of the door you chose being the wrong one is 2 in 3. Now, if you choose the correct door in the first place, the Game Master will show you one of the 2 remaining doors, which had the goat behind it. And if you switch doors, you would lose. Because you've chosen the right one, switching means you go to a goat door. Which means you lose. On the other hand, if you had chosen a goat door before, then the Game Master will open the only other remaining goat door, sorry. And by switching, you would switch to the car door and you would win. And so if you just count the probabilities of everything happening, you had a 1 in 3 chance of having chosen the correct door to begin with, and in those cases you lose. And you had a 2 in 3 chance of having chosen the wrong door to begin with, and in those cases you now win. So, by switching the doors, you effectively increased your chances of getting the car by 100%. By which I mean the chance of getting the car without switching are 1 in 3. The chances of getting the car after switching are 2 in 3. So you double your chances. Which seems counterintuitive to a lot of people, but in that case, it has to do with the fact that your decision of choosing a particular door influences the Game Master's decision, because he cannot open the door you've chosen. That was just how the show worked. And yeah, so as it turns out, switching in that case would increase your odds of getting the car, which is what you want, technically. There was a sort of comic strip I've seen on the internet where the guy was really happy to get the goat because he didn't really need a car, and he could teach the goat some cool tricks. But yeah, in general, it's a lot more advantageous to switch, assuming the goat is what you are going for. The car is what you're going for, sorry. If the goat is what you're going for, not switching is the better strategy. Oh yeah, there's another point which has sort of to do with statistics more than probability. There are a lot of quotes actually about the fact that statistics lie. And that in itself, like, guess I'm gonna have to go into that a little bit. Statistics themselves don't lie. Statistics themselves are merely collections of data. And unless, of course, the data was falsified or someone lied or something, those cannot be untrue. Again, going with the assumption that everyone involved spoke truthfully. if you're asking people, I don't know, if they've ever cheated on their partner, and a lot of them will probably lie and say no, even though they've done it, then yes, that statistics would not be particularly accurate, but that would not be because of an inherent problem with statistics, it would just be because people lied. But if you just take a random collection of data, like how much water did each household use, or something like that, then whichever results you get are truthful by themselves, so in that sense not a lie, because in that sense statistics doesn't lie. The lies which people refer to is obviously in the interpretation of statistics, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to get at. Now firstly, it's easy enough to misinterpret statistics in some ways. And one of the major problems with that is a sort of fallacy that people have. It's the idea that two events seem to be correlated, so the one event happening increases the odds of another happening. And to many people that seems to imply that one of the events is the result of the other. For example, there was a statistics or a sort of research done in about whether there was some correlation between Alzheimer's and living next to high voltage power lines. And so, as it turns out, people living next to these high voltage power lines had a statistically significant increased chance of getting Alzheimer's. So basically, by checking, do you have Alzheimer's, do you live next to a high voltage power line, they came to the conclusion that people living close to them had a higher chance of getting Alzheimer's. And so they concluded in that paper that living next to power lines increases the chance of getting Alzheimer's. Which, that in itself is correct. But then they further went on to say, so power lines cause Alzheimer's. And that in itself is not correct. The problem being, and that's the case in many of these misinterpretations, that we don't know whether there might be a common cause. For example, and in this particular statistical case that was found to be much more likely to be the issue, people living next to power lines tend to be not as wealthy, because houses and apartments close to them, like I'm talking about the big landlines, at least in Germany here we have them, like the large pylons with large power lines, those things. So apartments and just houses and such close to those are cheaper, because they are not as desirable to live in, because those things look ugly and chances are, and people are worried they might fall down or something. So cheaper housing. Which means people living there are people not having as much money, just in general. And that you could also do statistical questions like that, like you can correlate income and how close to those things you live, and as it turns out, people living close to those pylons and those power lines have lower incomes. So that's obviously true. And that tells you that it might be that the reason for the increased Alzheimer's is not necessarily the fact that these people live close to the power lines. It might just be that they don't have as much money. And now, not saying people with less money, because they have less money, are more likely to get Alzheimer's. It's more a point of people with less money tend to not be able to afford certain things, like frequent medical attention, like high quality food. So people with a lower income tend to buy cheaper food, for example. And cheaper food tends to be of a lesser quality, and it tends to have more well, non-food ingredients, I guess. Cheap meat tends to be of a lower quality because the animals have been fed with anything goes and stuff like that. So expensive meat in general tends to have come from free-range animals which were fed with, I guess, grass or such, just in the case of beef, for example. Whereas if you buy cheap stuff, it's probably from cow that's never seen the light of day and has been fed on cow, which is sad but true. And so the point might be that because these people generally have a lesser income, they generally have a less healthy lifestyle, because healthy lifestyles can be expensive. And so that might be the reason they have an increased chance of Alzheimer's. And because we don't know the exact causes for Alzheimer's, that turns out to be much more reasonable than the explanation of the power lines, because there would be no one could think of a reason why power lines would cause Alzheimer's. Just statistics seem to suggest that there might be the chance of that being the case, but as it happens, other explanations are better. And so that's kind of the, I guess, final point, that correlation does not imply causality, and you have to think of that whenever you read a certain statistics that says something. Just because two events seem to occur together more often, as in this case, living next to power lines and getting Alzheimer's, it doesn't mean that one is caused by the other. It might mean they have a common cause, and that's the case very often, and you should bear that in mind. And I'm assuming I've done an episode now, so I'll see you next time. Bye bye.